All right, well, I get the pleasure to introduce a wonderful woman here, does a lot of work in Northern California and throughout the country. Her and her husband do really inspiring things all over. I think she's going to tell you a little bit about you guys for this movement. Probably most know her through her ranch Tomcat down in Pescadero, but she does a lot of other amazing things in the world of banking and financing. And so I get to introduce the lovely KatTaylor. And then here's the advance if you want it. And you can use the space bar.
Thank you. Okay. So, I am deeply respectful of all the knowledge, wisdom, and ken in the room, which I can't possibly keep up with. And I know that you discussed over the course of this conference all sorts of production methodologies and supply chain and all that kind of stuff. So I thought today, with the honor of speaking to you and the culmination of your great... Yes? Oh, sorry, Simon. That I would talk a little bit more about visioning and a vision and a way toward a vision that I think where our effort is to allow all individuals, households, firms, ranches, farms, communities to have access to the best information and best methodologies to affect their own social, economic, and environmental objectives in that integrated manner that you all talk about at holistic management, but in a number of other communities as well. So this is a grand vision transitioning to fully grass-fed production and grassland with co-benefits. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're thinking about that at Tomcat Ranch. But to back up just a step, my husband Tom Steyer and I are deeply concerned with basically averting climate disaster and restoring broad prosperity for all humans to coexist on the planet. When we think about those challenges, we want to move immediately to opportunity sets. And the biggest opportunity sets for us seem to exist in three large systems that are highly interdependent: energy, food, and finance or money. We also wanted to approach those systems to understand their cycles and their interdependencies, a position of insight, which meant that we needed to be involved in organizations operating within them in our mind. So my husband is a climate activist and runs a political organization because he is suspecting that there is a political problem in moving towards climate solutions as much as anything else. We started a bank and quickly added 3 venture capital funds, parallel processing with the bank to address the financial system and deeply understand about where the hurdles and gateways are in that system. And we started a ranch to understand animal ag production and how it moves through the larger food system and what learnings we have from that. One broad observation we have across them all is if we all do better when we all do better, we need everyone's engagement. Everybody needs to participate. So we have a reverse network effect in the electoral process right now where actually it feels like your vote is worth less and less because fewer and fewer people are showing up. So we have to find new ways around that. In the banking system, banking is actually the original and most powerful form of crowdfunding. You've heard that term a lot lately. Crowdfunding is the co-creation of a vision, pooling together resources in order to achieve something that you mutually want together. If you think about depositors in a bank, they are pooling their funds in a bank for 2 primary functions. One is to facilitate commerce, to make sure there's cash flow and liquidity for businesses and nonprofits and municipal organizations to create goods and services and those things that we need. And the other is so that that money's available when they need to borrow it, the depositors. But in every bank, at least $9 of deposits join $1 of equity. So they're actually the predominant form of funding. We've just forgotten as depositors that we should get to co-create that future. So the same is occurring to us in the food production systems, that our choices around food and our opportunities, more importantly, are the way that we can co-create a future that we actually want to see, which is one of climate stability and broad prosperity. So, the leads us to take a look at the supply chain of the food system and see where some opportunities are. So this is a KatTaylor cartoonish kindergarten example of a supply chain. But if you see at the far end, it has the sources of production, and then it moves through a black box, which we call Tomcat Ranch, where we have an opportunity to help with some things or learn or broadcast broad observations, and then it moves into the actual demand side of the supply chain. Who's actually buying it? What kind of choices are they presented with? So the green boxes are where we think our opportunities lie. And the first one, A, is for access. We are trying to create the conditions for more lands and more healthy lands to move into a production system that creates co-benefits that we all treasure. Those being carbon sequestration, water retention and quality, animal welfare, a healthy nutritional product, biodiversity, the list goes on and on and on. So we have to think hard about that. Why are lands either leaving the system or not going in the first place? This leads us to look at interesting models like Farmland LP that's trying to secure conventionally farmed lands to put into organic production. It leads us to look at what are the barriers for going in. So a lot of that is competition by other demand for lands, either for biofuels, supply stock, or housing, for instance. B is for big buyers. So we think a lot about the demand triggers that are massive. They're called the MUSHPs, municipals, universities, schools, hospitals, and prisons. And we started looking at schools because there's a school in our midst. So when we're taking stock of our own community, we want our school to be healthy first and foremost. And so we were able to learn massive lessons in Pescadero La Junta School District with the help of our ranch staff about how to shift the food there from very, very poor nutritional quality food to a very high percentage of free and reduced children eaters and their colleagues, meaning their other students and faculty members. And we were able to do that in a way that led us to take on a larger project in the Oakland Unified School District that's now underway. And I will say one of the interesting things is it seems like an impossible project to accomplish, but with the help of Center for Eco-Literacy, we've now started something called California Food for California Kids. It's actually a branding campaign facilitated by some real fundamental work. C is for convening, connecting. That's really important because we're learning as a crowd, as the collective, and we have to get together a lot to get all of the insights and benefits on the table and broadcast them widely. D is for demonstration, meaning we have to evidence what's going on and de-risk it. That's our special ability as well, since we are not a household livelihood ranch. We are not a household dependent upon the ranch for our existence, so we should take the risks and de-risk them. And then E is for efficiency. We may pass along value to an end user of our wonderful beef products, but we shouldn't pass along inefficiency. It's not fair to them and it won't win in the main. And then F is for healthy food, what you just heard a lot about. How can we get this best product to the most people, not just those who can afford it? So sorry, I jumped my own gun, but here are just some of the strategy sets, I would say, we're looking at, and here are some insights falling out of them. So I was jumping the gun getting to this. So California Food for California Kids was an effort to create a larger pool of constituencies in favor of healthy food for school children in California. California serves almost 1 billion meals every year. Many children in California rely on school food for their fundamental source of nutrition. Over 50% of school kids now are on free and reduced, which is a shocking statistic. But we have to lean into that and figure out what to do about it. So first, what Center for Eco-Literacy did was look at the season and flavor palettes of the 47 languages spoken in California foods and make sure it tastes good. You know, it's really important that food tastes good and is familiar, recognizable, something comfortable to eat. Then we spent a lot of time creating a cookbook that would squash all the numbers for what used to be called food service workers. Now we call them chefs. So make their life easy to spend their time cooking, not calculating. And then we put all this in a cookbook and did training so that chefs from the school districts could come learn together, share their own recipes and ideas, and go back and get back to cooking for school kids. Then the branding campaign was an effort to get broader adoption outside of Oakland and Pescadero, and I'm happy to say at this point it's recruited 48 school districts representing a potential of 220 million meals a year. And the branding was just try it once. California Thursdays, just do one Thursday a month, see what you can come up with. The more people do it, the more it takes off. And you'll notice there's not a certification process in here yet. We may have to go to one, but at this point, people are using California food, which is good for all California producers. They're eschewing federal commodities, which are among the worst food, and they're galvanizing together in blocks. So Turlock is now cooking for school districts around it and serving 2 meals a week of California food for them and their compatriots. The convening part, rancher to rancher convenings. We are social animals. We learn really well together. We've also can share information in a way that's non-competitive and get to best practices. It's also really important that we come together to achieve scale, even though we admire so much small and mid-scale production methodologies and the deep ken of knowing your own land. Everything is in context. You take the toolkit from where you sit and you know what your social, environmental, and economic goals may be. But getting together for scale is going to help us overcome some very inefficient and market troubling disadvantages we have. So in other words, aggregation to large processors. We have a really interesting conversation going on with Cargill right now about gaining access for customized producers. Getting that kind of line production efficiency will just help us in the end markets. And then the last mile distribution, I know all of us wrestle with this. This is where the work across the systems really comes into play. There's a huge number of innovative startups out there right now. One of them, Local Bushel, we've just invested in, and they're really bringing fulfillment, true fulfillment to that last mile production. We need more of those companies. Then D is for demonstration. So the surest way for the naysayers, and actually in my book, skepticism or cynicism is the worst enemy we face. I can take on an aggressive, holistic conversation. It's hard to overcome eye rolling. So we need to demonstrate this in a kind of ironclad way. And we've connected with PricewaterhouseCoopers. Yes, that is one of the big four accounting firms. Didn't think this was in my future, but we need deeply evidence-based strategies to be tracked, modeled, monitored, and reported out upon. And that also allows for real-time correction. So we were doing a TIM study with them, Total Impact Measurement and Management. It's actually a very sophisticated life cycle analysis of the Tomcat Ranch production system today, the same system in 5 years modeled out, and then the counterfactual, which would be the CAFO industrial system. And it's not a maximization model, it's an optimization model. And I would argue that's when we're looking for true cost accounting, that's what we're really doing, is we call out the values or the benefits that we want, and we're trying to measure them. So that is actually looking at just that long list I gave you of soil, carbon sequestration, biodiversity, animal welfare, nutrition, and trying to run those models against one another. We will be broadcasting that, I believe, after this October month is over, and learning from it on an ongoing basis, and helping that others will join us, not only to get the insights of the study, but to potentially join a data consortium, taking up tools that we are trying to create, like mapping tools for in the field, not only helping you plan and implement a grazing strategy, but also collect data that can make this data consortium ever more rich and robust. I would say also that we're very hep on trying to increase the economic viability of these types of animal production that create all the co-benefits. And in order to do that, we need to interact with policy people. So we're working with EDF. They are, Environmental Defense Fund is the NGO called on by the CARB, the California Air Resource Quality Board, to create the protocols for carbon credits. They are looking at land management. They started with sort of supercharged compost grazing, compost additives before grazing, and they're moving on to rotational intensive management grazing and other strategies. And we need to produce more evidence that the public is actually willing, through intermediaries, to pay for the co-benefits that these systems can produce. So how are we doing all this? Well, we're doing it with a lot of really wonderful partners, and this is my shout out to them. We are a learning laboratory. We are co-creating on-site and off-site. Thanks. And so they include Point Blue Conservation Science, who's in the room right now, Simbi Biologic, which is advanced aqua and hydroponics, Gallup Ventures, which is team building using horse sense, Early Bird Ranch, our poultry producers. In an integrated grazing plan, we do use laying hens following along. Left Coast Grass Fed, which is our sales and marketing organization. And all of you in the room who have joined us on-site or off to co-create this future that we want to see. And so what is that future? Well, if we are here right now, where all the animals are started on grassland, and they are creating the co-benefits of the potential for carbon credits, conservation easements, and water benefits allude to, they then leave and go to the CAFO industrial system, way too high a percentage of them, and they go to those end users you see there. They were losing those 8 to 24 months of co-benefits in the grasslands. If we could just start migrating more and more, we think actually the first migration happens if we can, in an evidence-based way, demonstrate the increased yield of forage under rotational intensive management or whatever works in situ in your place. That might be the first step. The next step might be proving out these carbon and conservation markets a little bit more. And ultimately, we want to get to this. So those of you who studied the natural step methodology with me back in the 70s, remember the backcasting process? So we need to get busy about that. What do we want to see, and what does it look like? What is the step before that happens, and the step before that, and the step before that? Oops, and we're not taking questions, but I have a short song. I am so honored to be on this journey with you all. I wish I could spend every day talking about this. I do spend most of my time trying to run the bank. But when I retire from the bank, I fully intend to be completely in the saddle on this, and very deeply grateful to Alan and the Savory Institute and Chris and everyone who invited us to participate in this glorious convening. It really breaks my heart to see a dear old friend go down in that worn out place again. Do you know the sound of a closing door? Have you heard that sound somewhere before? Do you wonder if she knows you anymore? I wrapped your love around me like a chain, but I never was afraid that it would die. You can dance in a hurricane, but only if you're standing in the eye. Where did you learn to walk? Where did you learn to run? Away from everything you love. Did you think the bottle would ever ease your pain? Did you think that love's a foolish game? Did you find somebody else to take the blame? I wrapped your love around me like a chain, but I never was afraid that it would die. You can dance in a hurricane, but only if you're standing in the eye. I am a sturdy soul, and there ain't no shame in lying down in the bed you've made. Can you fight the urge to run for another day? You might make it further if you learn to stay. I wrapped your love around me like a chain, but I never was afraid that it would die. You can dance in a hurricane, but only if you're standing in the eye. You can dance in a hurricane, but only if you're standing in the eye. Thank you very much.
I love it. Thank you. That was great. Okay.